Welcome to What Works and Why, a podcast where we explore the ideas, decisions, and frameworks that go into building enduring businesses. Today's conversation is about the craft of building a global industrial company from India. Our guest is Dr. Jairam Varadaraj, the managing director of ElGi Equipments, one of the world's leading manufacturers of industrial air compressors. The story of ElGi is in many ways the story of a quiet transformation. What began as a diversified manufacturer of garage equipment has gradually evolved into a global industrial equipments company with a market capitalization pushing at about 2 billion US dollars. But this transformation did not happen overnight. It involved a series of deliberate choices about product focus, engineering capability, global markets, and the long patient work of building distribution and service networks around the world. In today's conversation, we go deep into that journey. From Dr. Varadaraj's return to India after his PhD in the United States, to the strategic decisions that shaped ElGi's trajectory, and the lessons from building a globally competitive manufacturing company from Coimbatore. Dr. Varadaraj, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here, Prasid. Thank you for having me in your show.
Thanks a lot for your time. You spent several years in the US before completing your PhD and returning to India. At that point in your life, what career path did you imagine for yourself, and what ultimately led you to join the family business at ElGi Equipments?
Interesting question. Actually, I went to do my PhD because I wanted to be a teacher. That's a profession that gives me great amount of satisfaction. It still does. But after I finished my PhD in the business school, um, in order to make a career, you need to publish a lot of papers, right? Which was fine, but the kind of papers that they were expecting me to publish was very statistical and mathematical. And I didn't believe, having come from a family business, uh, I didn't believe that business worked on mathematical models and statistics. So I couldn't see myself doing it for the rest of my life. So the option I had was join another company or join consulting or try to fulfill what my thesis was. It was to understand why Indian companies are not competitive worldwide. Right? So that was the profession that I was aspiring, and then subsequently came back home. Yeah.
So, when you first joined the company, what did the organization actually look like? Could you give us a sense for the scale of the business, the size of the organization, the products that you were involved in, the markets that you served? Could you
Okay.
give us a sense for where the company was when you came back and joined the family business?
Okay. So just a bit of a context. I joined this company as a consequence of a very amicable separation among the various members of our family, right? So I was given this responsibility for me to, as part of my, whatever you want to call it, inheritance or whatever. So I didn't know anything about this business. This company had a reputation in the market, and that's all hearsay that I had. So when I joined the company, the revenue was around 90 crores, which would be roughly, I guess, $10 million in today's context. It had a lot of people, close to 3,500, including 2,800 on the shop floor. Profitability was minuscule. It was already listed. And we were straddling about 8 different businesses, right? Compressors, automotive equipment, brake systems for heavy vehicles, pasteurizers and bottle washers for the brewery, drip irrigation systems, ambulances, medical vans, missile testing vehicles. It was just horizontally spread over multiple businesses. That was the context. Yeah.
So, when you moved back into the family business, how did you initially fit into the organization? I mean, did you have a clearly defined role, or did you have to find your way into the business? Did you have to find your way through, what you were going to focus on and what your responsibilities were?
So when I joined the company, there was already a CEO who was from outside the family, and he was on his, last years of his tenure. So we overlapped for a couple of years, right? And it gave me a little bit of time to think about what's next for the business, without getting into the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of it. So that was really the context. In terms of specific roles, no, it was not carved out and say, you look at this. It was saying you go run the business, right? So that was the overall context.
So I'm very curious to know about your diagnosis of the business at the time. What was working well, what was not? What were some of the challenges that you found glaring at that point in time?
So you got to remember the context at that time. It was still the licensing system. So it was a protected market. We were one of few manufacturers of compressors. Our quality was not the greatest, but we were very, very customer focused in the sense that we compensated for deficiencies in quality with a very strong after sales, right? So we protected the reputation of the company, of the brand with customers. So there was a loyalty that was there. But the company had a bad reputation in terms of integrity. It was not known in Coimbatore society to be a very clean company. There's a lot of accusation of corruption. So that was another thing. Our technology was abysmally primitive, right? We had licenses that dated back many years. And even the licenses were pre-generation technology. So very poor and very primitive. Our manufacturing was very fragmented into multiple plants. There was no cohesiveness in assembly lines, machining. So it was very fragmented and spread all over the place. Yeah.
So I mean, it was the rise. I mean, it was the 80s. It was the peak of the license, Raj, and at that time, manufacturing companies in India. It was pretty easy to make money in that you could navigate the bureaucratic corridors. You could manage the bureaucracy, and then and then you could say that you had these protected bastions, captive customers.
Sure.
What made you see the potential? What made you believe that the company had the potential to become something much larger?
I can't say the company had the potential. We had to create that, right? But what drove the decision to explore it was, one was my thesis. Say, why aren't Indian companies competitive worldwide? So if you look at it, 1944, after the World War, Japan was destroyed and all the Japanese companies were rebuilding. 1950, Korean War got over and all the Korean companies were building. 1947, India got independence and Indian companies were building up. Roughly the same timelines, right? And companies in all these three countries went to the same European or American companies for technology, right? But the companies in those two countries took that base and scaled it to another level, whereas Indian companies did not, right? So I was curious to understand why, right? Because you got to understand in that time and even now, the Indian market for any product is a very small fraction of the global market, right? So if you really want to build a large business, it made logical sense to do business globally. So I was curious to know, why is it that we stayed within India, right? Now, that was, I had a point of view. After interviewing about 23 CEOs of very large companies in India, I had a point of view that it is not so much an impossibility. It was very easy to make money in India by horizontally diversifying. If you had to go vertical, you had to be an inch wide, mile deep, and take a long game. Horizontal diversification is a short game. right? You can quickly get there. So I said, yeah, if you take a long game, the size of the business at the end of the rainbow is a lot bigger than the horizontal game. So that was one prompt. The second prompt, of course, was the liberalization. 92, when we had to open up the markets, dismantle the licensing system, every Indian company just suddenly overnight became naked, right, and vulnerable, right? So the earlier rules of the game didn't apply anymore, right? So we had to retool ourselves. So these two came together, right?
Sir, I mean, it touched upon a point that I was super curious about when reading about the LG equipment story. So one of the early strategic decisions that you made at LG was to establish focus on air compressors. You do away with diversification and bring about product focus. So transforming the company from a diversified business catering largely to, say, garage equipments to a focused industrial equipment company. So this raises a number of questions. So why compressors? What was attractive about the market? What capabilities did the company need in order to compete with the global players? And perhaps even more interestingly, what goes into building a competitive industrial product suite? The engineering challenges, the manufacturing challenges, and the internal organizational changes required to support that focus. So I would like to spend a good amount of time unpacking this strategic pivot, sir, and understanding how it unfolded. So I think a good place to start would be to go back to that decision point where you felt the company needed greater strategic focus. And was it a gradual realization, or did it just happen with your thesis, or was it a product of the conversations that you were having?
It was not gradual, nor was it a eureka moment that you wake up one day and say, this is what I want to do. It is a reasonably short, structured kind of a conclusion. One was obviously the opportunity, global. The second is the liberalization. So when we looked at it in context, we were in 8 different businesses, right? Now, the best in the world in each of these 8 businesses were at the entrance to India, right? They were all waiting to enter India. Now, not only those companies, but their customers are also coming into India, right? Which means they were naturally going to pull them into India. So when we reviewed our level of competence, it is not just technology, manufacturing, marketing, service competence. We were very far behind. Now, it was possible to build those competencies required to compete against the best in India for the entire 8 businesses. But to do that, you required a lot of capital, right? Now, the capital that was required was not justified by the size of the Indian market for each of these 8 products, right? So, on one hand, in order to survive in India against the expected onslaught from the best in the world, you had to invest a lot of money. But that money did not make any financial sense by looking at only the Indian market, right? Which meant that we had to go global, but we couldn't go global across all, right? We didn't have the money to invest in all, and nor did we have the managerial bandwidth to build a global business across all. So we took very clear decisions. Now, why compressors? Compressor at that time was the largest business, but not by a significant margin, right? Our automotive component system that we're supplying brakes to a large OE was as big as compressors. But compressor, we were big, we were in India maybe number 2, right? And more importantly, in the compressor business, there is a very attractive aftermarket business, which is profitable, right? Then we looked at the global opportunity of compressors, and we felt that there is a opportunity. I'll come back and talk about why we felt that there is an opportunity. So combined with the opportunity size and the profitability, we picked compressors. There was also reasons why we did not want to pick the others. So, for instance, the brake systems. We were a component supplier. Now, as a component supplier, you become subject to the vagaries of the OE, right? Their business goes up and down, your business goes up and down. You don't control the end product. As a consequence, you suffer pretty violently, right? This is not a business that we wanted to be in. We wanted to control and connect with the end customer, right? So we got rid of that. Pasteurizers and bottle washers, like there were only two customers, United Breweries and Chauvelers, right? But it was already news that Foster's, Stroh's, Heineken, Carlsberg, they were all going to come to India and they were going to bring their equipment manufacturers. We didn't have the capability to deliver to them. So that was another. So similarly, we had reasons why not to be in certain business and also why we should be in. So we picked compressors and automotive equipment to stay in and either shut down or sold the rest.
No, sir. I mean, it would have been pretty tempting to pick, brake systems and automotive components at that time because of the emerging ecosystems.
Yeah.
Say Maruti was doubling down on their component ecosystem supplier base in India. So could you dive a little bit deeper into why air compressors, why that market was particularly attractive, and how you thought about the competitive landscape for air compressors at that time?
So compressors, like I told you, we were number 2, right? And it was profitable, correct? Because of the aftermarket. And we were not leveraging the aftermarket at that time as effectively as we should have, right? So there was an opportunity there to build our profitability. Globally at that time, there was very large number 1, right? And the number 2 was significantly smaller compared to the number 1, right? There was a very asymmetrical industrial structure, right? Which we said is not normal in a mature capital goods business, right? And the only reason is only the number 1 was really building the business on fundamentals, whether it is technology, products, people, processes, markets and brands, deliberate and playing the long game, right? The rest of the companies were either taking short-term views to build annual businesses, right? So we said, if we play a long game, there is an opportunity for us to be number 2, right? But it's a long game, right? So that's the direction we took, right? So that's the reason why compressors became very attractive for us to stay in. Automotive components, yes, the automotive ecosystem was expanding. But I'll give you an example. I don't want to mention names of OEs, but we were supplying to a large truck manufacturer and they developed us as a vendor because they had a single source. We developed, they tested, we validated, they were very happy with the product and they were willing to give us a fair share of their business. But the price that they asked was very low. So I said, if you can guarantee me this volume, I will accept this price as a challenge, right? So we did that. In a year and a half, that volume became 10% of that, right? So when I went back and I asked, said, it's now from 3,000, it's become 300. Can you revise the price? They said, no, it doesn't work like that in automotive. So there was a huge imbalance between the OEM and the component vendors, right? And if we commit capital to an India-centric business, to an OEM, where we don't control really the technology, it's not sustainable, right? So that's number 1. Now, that's one point. The second point is, when you want to build a global business, it has to be country agnostic. What I mean by that is, if you're relying only on cheap Indian labor, then you're truly not global, right? So if you take the Indian IT industry, they have global scale, but they're not global companies, right? If they have to run their business with expensive Indians, as expensive as software engineers in Europe or America, it'll be very difficult, right? So we said, no, we want Indians to be expensive and still be competitive and still be global, right? Which meant not because we wanted to move away from India, but because it gives us the ability to operate in any part of the world without having to rely on any one country, right? So when you look at auto components, that did not give us that capability. But compressors, yes, there was a clear opportunity to be country agnostic, build it with expensive Indians, and build it globally. So tick the box on multiple things, right? So that was the reason why we said, okay, let's pursue this. Yeah.
Very interesting, sir. Sir, at some point, every leader asks themselves a fundamental question: right? What should this company become? Right. So once you set the direction on compressors, when you began thinking about the future, what possibilities did you imagine for the business, and what were the key priorities that you focused on?
So initially, we did not know the exact size of the global market. We knew that it was huge, and we knew that it is exponentially bigger than the Indian market, but we didn't know the exact number. So therefore, we said our initial goal was we want to be a significant player in the global business. We did not have a specific targeted position, right? So we said that's good enough for the moment. Now, if you want to be a significant player in this large opportunity that is filled with extremely strong players, you had to focus on certain building blocks, right? Some foundations have to be played. You can't just run into these markets, sell products at a 30% cheaper and expect to become a significant player, right? So we said, number one was technology, right? We had to move away from being slaves to somebody else's designs to build our own, right? Now, to do that, you need to know why, you have to move to know how. From know how to know why. So when you go into a license agreement, you get know how, right? What that means is they will tell you how to assemble this, how to machine this, how to do this, but they'll never tell you why, right? Now, if you don't know the why, you can't build the next, right? So our focus was to build technology, but the why of the technology, not just the how, yeah? Now, what that requires is you can't go and do license and get why. You'll get how, yeah? You had to go at a fundamental level of science to understand the technology, right? Which meant partnering with universities, with professors, with consultants to really architect the assembling of the why. Yeah. So that took us a long time because we were starting with less than zero. Yeah. So that had to be built, right? It required talent, it required capital, it required clear direction. So lot of mistakes. You have to have stamina for mistakes, right? Because it's not a straight line. It is a very curved line. You need to be able to provide the company enough stamina to navigate through that. So that's one solid piece that had to be built. The second is when we are in front of customers in Europe or America, this we visualized then, you're an unknown brand with a made in India label, right? Now, compressor is not a equipment that makes money for people, but if the compressor goes down, the factory goes down, right? So that's a very significant piece of equipment. Customers will hesitate to take a bet on unknown brand. That over and above that is made in India. Made in India does not have a reputation for quality, right? There are concerns.
Yeah, especially
right?
back then.
Back then, right? So we had to build quality which is not just as good as the European and American competitors, but far, far ahead of it. What we used to call as fit and forget, right? So, which is not about just process design. It is not about designing to prevent failure. All that are foundations. You have to do that. But it is about digging really deep into your culture in the company, your systems and processes that envelop that culture, and a ruthless, unforgiving attitude towards defects, right? And not at my level alone, across the company. That total unacceptance of any defects, right? So it takes time to build that culture, because in India, you go outside, you are supposed to drive on the left, you drive on the right, life goes on. Nothing happens. Yeah. You go home, electricity doesn't work, it's cut off, life goes on. Right? The drainage doesn't work, life goes on. Water doesn't come, life goes on. We are used to wide tolerances, right?
I was reading this book by R.C. Bhargava, the erstwhile managing director of Maruti, and he was talking about the initial challenges that Maruti faced when it was trying to implement the Deming strategies,
Sure,
TQM,
sure.
all of that. And he had a very interesting line where he talks about how outside the factory, people are living in absolute chaos, missed buses, roads, total traffic, total chaos. And the moment you step into the factory, you're expecting complete precision. And then there is a paradox in the lives of people who work in the factory.
Absolutely. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, how do you expect people who are used to very wide tolerance to come and produce very narrow tolerance, right? So it meant also changing the life of people, right? If you're going to have people who are paid very low, right, and who don't have aspirations, who don't have any hope coming to work, right, they're not going to bring their heart and head to work, right? For them, it is a salary, right? We had to convert that salary into a commitment, right? That salary then cannot be find the cheapest labor, right? In fact, in our company, we have a goal that our shop floor employees should be the highest paid in the world, right? We have a goal and we're working towards that goal, right? Why? It's not to be some egalitarian socialist company. It is to say, if there is no, a sense of saying, this is really important for me, right? This job is very important, right? For me, my family, and my circumstances, right? You will not be able to change it, right? So the outside is chaos, right? But inside has to be perfectly in order, right? So we had to build all that. So all the technology and the quality was a long process. It took us almost, I would say, 20 years, right, to systematically build it. Could we have, knowing what we have done, could we have done it faster if we were to redo it again? Of course, right? But then, history happens, after the fact, right? It doesn't happen before. So, so that was really the foundational processes. Yeah.
No, sir, it's even more interesting because you began these processes. I mean, bringing R&D in-house, bringing engineering in-house. It was a time when not too many Indian companies were doing it. Probably some of the large Indian automotive OEMs were doing it. Some of their core, tier 1 suppliers were doing it, but not too many companies outside of that. Even in the compressor market at that time, I would assume that most of the companies were importing design, and their India manufacturing was purely an assembly operation. It would be really interesting for us to understand, to get into the weeds of that process of bringing R&D and engineering in-house. You could, I probably think of it in 2 or 3 critical areas. So one would be the development of the component ecosystem itself. 2 would be, like you spoke about, getting the workforce and the culture within LG ready in order to accept, in order to normalize to this new scenario, focus on design, focus on quality. So could you really help us understand what really went into focusing on quality and focusing on design in-house?
So, if you look at our technology journey, uh, we started like any other company. We had some products, we had designs for the components that go into the products, but we did not know why the components are designed that way, right? So, first we had to understand that, right? So, we had a partnership with a university in England for 10 years, right?
Wow.
So, the partnership was not about designing products for us. The partnership was more of teaching us the why. Yeah. And for the university also, it was not a straight arrow because they had generic competence, right? That generic competence had to be converted into a specific why, yeah, knowledge, specific knowledge for us, right? So we went through that, and in the process, university technology, it can be sometimes very theoretical, right? You need to take that and make it very practical, right? Now, that conversion process has a lot of pitfalls, right? Because that's the why is built on failures, right? Yeah. Now, in fact, if you ask me, people talk about how LG succeeded. Tell me about your success. Tell me. I think the more appropriate question to ask is tell me about your failures, because it is on the back of failures that success comes. Because success is the end. After that, what? You've succeeded. But it's those failures that gave you the foundation for the success, right? So, in the conversion of theory into practice, of absorbing the why of technology, there were a lot of mistakes, right? We made a lot of errors, right? We made lots of prototypes were built that failed. We sometimes very frustrated. Why? We don't know. We ask the professors, they have a answer, but that answer doesn't tally. So we try and take the answer, interpret it, then do small experiments, and then, this works, and this is why it works, correct? So it's a iterative process that took us there, and that was why it took a long time, yeah. Um, so that was one aspect. The quality was, you didn't even know, first of all, what was the extent of failures that were happening. I told you before all this transformation, the company had good loyalty with customers because of our service, not because of our quality, right? So, but in order to build quality, we had to know the defects. And the service guys or our system was not geared towards recording defects, right? It's only when you know, then you can solve, right?
Correct.
So that was a huge transformation. It took us almost 3 to 4 years to put together a system and a discipline, not just with our own people, but with our distributors, because we are a distribution-led business, right? We have 60 odd distributors in India. Their service people go and service the machines. They encounter defects. They need to record it, right? And we had to create the system, the process, and the discipline and the review, right? To make that a second habit, right? In the company. Right? That was a long thing. The minute we had that data, right, it was a huge progression in our quality journey, because now you know what had to be solved for, right? Then we took the biggest problems, went to the root cause. That is when we started our TQM journey. Bring that discipline of a customer orientation, process oriented problem solving, going into the details, being data driven, all that kind of dovetailed together, right? And then the quality started improving. We still have a long way to go, but we were improving. Yeah.
Were the Japanese compressor companies an influence on you at that point in time? Just Japanese manufacturing in general?
Definitely Japanese manufacturing, because in my own thesis, if you look at it, Japanese companies, when they entered the US market in the 60s and 70s, many of them could not even pronounce the Japanese names, right? Now they are household names, right? They went through a long journey. It's not like they made great quality products right from day one. They also had a lot of defects, but they recognized it was more a national pride as well as a company strategy saying, we will not make products that fail, right? So their journey was definitely a benchmark. Similarly, the Korean companies, which basically learned also from the Japanese company, right? Yeah.
So, looking back at that period, were there points when the strategy felt uncertain? What were some of the toughest moments during that transition?
So the first 15, 20 years was spent on building the back end, right? Because without that foundation, there's no strategy, correct? So the minute we were coming closer to a level of standard, we started looking at pushing our business outside the country. Now, our first strategy was we went through 4-5 different strategies till where we are today. Yeah? Our first strategy was that, we are not known, but now that we have built this technology and built this quality, maybe we can go as a critical, we have something in a compressor called an air end. Yeah, the air end is the equivalent of an engine in a car, right? That's the key part. So we thought we could be the air end supplier to all the compressor companies. We give very high efficiency, very high quality. Maybe that's an opportunity. So we met just about every compressor company. And their thing was, you are a compressor company in India. So we can't buy a critical part from you, right? So that would be strategically, it'll be not aligned for us. Then we said, okay, then they said maybe components, right? So we made a mistake of saying, okay, we'll build a component business for compressors. We set it up, we ran it just like the automotive component. It had these cycles and we were not controlling the end customer. We did not remember that lesson. We repeated that failure, right? So we stopped that. Then we went into a third strategy, which is like Intel inside. We said ElGi inside. So we said we will acquire small compressor companies in different parts of the world, and everything outside will be the local brand, but everything inside will be ElGi, right? Okay. So we acquired a company in France, we acquired a company in Italy, Rotair, right? Very interestingly, we found that once we did that strategy, everything was Rotair in Italy, Bel Air in France, but everything inside was completely in ElGi, right? Customers started saying, no, this does not make sense because this Bel Air is a small compressor company. It is incapable of supplying this standard of machine. So there's a disconnect in the market. So our distributors and our salespeople came and said, no, we're finding it difficult, right? So we said, okay, we will go clean sheet of paper, ElGi worldwide, right? So that's our current strategy now. So these are all the multiple strategies that we tried, failed, and improved. Yeah.
Sir, could you talk a little bit more about how you have thought about M&A over the years? Because, I mean, if you look at a company like, say, Atlas Copco, the way that they've grown over the years, right? So they've been, I think, they're at a stable 6 to 7% organic growth year on year, supplemented by a 3 to 4% inorganic growth year on year. And they've largely grown through their strategy of rolling up smaller, fragmented players across the market. So how have you thought about M&A over the years, and could you take us through the evolution in your thinking about M&A going through the last 20-30 years?
So we have done so far 5 acquisitions, right? All the acquisitions are they are two kinds. One is a product acquisition, right? Or it has been a customer access acquisition, right? So distributors that we buy. So acquisition is important for us, but it has to be very strategic. We will not do acquisition just to build a top line. There has to be a strategic intent, right? Will we go and buy another compressor company just for the top line? No, right? But if that company has a technology that is adjacent to our current portfolio, we will definitely look at it. If there is a distribution company, our primary commitment is to work through distributors because we believe they have relationship with customers, they have skin in the game, they are the best partners for us to grow. But there could be a situation where in a region, either there is no distributor or the existing distributor is unwilling to partner with us, and there is an opportunity comes for acquiring a distributor, we will definitely look at that, right? So it's a very strategic play for products and customer access, not just for the top line.
So thank you. So the other aspect of LG's journey that I've been really curious about is that is how early the company began looking beyond India and expanding internationally, right? So competing internationally meant facing companies with decades of experience, strong brands, extensive distribution networks, and a deep on-ground service. So I mean, this is super interesting, and I'd like to spend some time, getting into the thinking and the decisions that went into building LG into a global industrial company, right? And I think a good place to start would be, would be the discussion about how you thought about LG's right to win in the global markets, and how did you think about positioning against established players like Copco? What did you think of, was LG's competitive edge in these competitive markets?
The fundamental thing view is through the lens of the customer, right? So when we looked at what drives the customer's behavior, it's the life cycle cost. It is, people, 20% of the market buys on price, 80% buys on value. So that 80% is what you need to focus on. If you focus on that 20%, you can't build scale. Yeah. So for that 80%, the number one criteria is energy efficiency, right? So when we built our technology platform, right, we focused on saying, how can we, even while we are building the why, we build the why on ability to make the most energy efficient compressors, right? So today, if you ask me, in almost all the machines that are there, models, we are number one as far as efficiency is concerned in the world, not in India, right? So this did not happen by accident. This, even when we were building our technology thing, we were not building it for cost. We were building it to be the most efficient, right? And if you look at the energy cost, right, 10% of the industrial power globally is consumed by electricity, right? So every 1% improvement in efficiency is a 0.1% reduction in the global industrial power. That's phenomenal, right? That's an opportunity that is there. So our entire focus is on that, right? Besides that, we have lots of technologies that in the pipeline that we are talking about. Again, other than energy, other elements of life cycle cost. How to reduce consumable cost, how to reduce the maintenance cost, right? So all these are there. So that entire focus is on that. Yeah.
Interesting, sir. So, do you remember the first big international order that you won, and what did it teach you about competing in global markets?
I think the biggest international order we won was from a distributor in South Africa. Yeah, at that time, this was probably in the early 2000, right? Late 1990s, early 2000. That was a huge learning because on one hand, we were excited that we've got this huge order, right? It's only when we executed and supplied and the machine started failing, we realized how much we did not know, right? So we said, okay, this is a learning up. This is a learning curve. We had two options. One is to say, sorry, I can't do anything. Your fault for having chosen us. This is it. Which meant that our ambition for being a global company is gone, right? We said, no, this is a learning opportunity. Let's go and find out what's wrong with the design of our products that's causing all these failures. Because if we learn from this, we can then cross-deploy across so many markets. So it was almost a 1.5 year of frustration, right? Terrible frustration because the customers bought the machine. They're a rental company. They're renting the machine to end users. Machine is failing. The rental company is not able, the guy who rented it is not able to do his contract work. They are angry. So it was a very messy period, right? But huge learning, yeah. Huge learning in terms of how to enhance the quality of the product.
So, sir, one interesting feature of the compressor industry is that a large share of the lifetime value from the sale of a product, it comes from aftermarket services, spare parts, maintenance, oil changes, changing of filters, all of that. How did LG think about building this part of the business, and what went into building a strong global service organization?
So, one is, like I said, we are a distribution-led business, right? So a huge part of our aftermarket comes from distributors, right? Now, unlike our leading competitors in this business, we like to partner with distributors, right? Which means that we get a profit on sale of parts. They get a profit on sale of parts, but they get all the profit from service, right? We don't like to go into service. We teach them service, but they will do the service and they will charge the customer and earn the profit, right? So in the value chain of aftermarket profitability, we are probably playing in only 1/3, right? 2/3 is with the distributor, right? That is point number one. We will not change it because we believe partnerships are important. The second is, compressor is installed and they are installed in factories spread all over the country, all over the world, right? It is important for us to have a process of tracking these compressors, monitoring them on an everyday basis. The earlier thing was, if you look at a spare part, filter, you sell a filter for 6,000 rupees, whereas you sell a compressor for 3 lakhs, right? The tendency for the distributor was to focus on the 3 lakh sale rather than the 6,000 rupee sale. We had to construct and educate them that it is the 6,000 that is more profitable than this 3 lakhs, right? So we did the arithmetic and we showed them that every $1 of equipment sale gives you $2 of profit over a life cycle, right? So you need to focus disproportionately on this as well, right? So again, it is a cultural transformation that happens through education, through process, through review, right? We still have a long way to go, right? But we are progressing there.
So one of the things that I was curious about was that establishing strategic focus, and it often means moving resources away from from existing product lines and from status quo. And inheriting a family business, with its existing status quos, coming up with a refreshed strategic direction would have involved pulling resources away from existing product lines and from existing power centers within the organization. Did your decision to focus on compressors and to sell to international markets, did it create internal resistance within the company? And how did you manage those internal tensions? How did the organization itself change with these broader strategic changes that you brought?
No, this is an interesting question because change is very difficult, right? And especially when the change is not clearly visible, is even more difficult, right? So let's say you're making product X and you tell the organization, we are going to make product Y and we are going to get the technology from so and so, so and so. This is the investment. That change, that's also change, right? But the change is a little bit more palatable because it's very visible. So here we were making a change saying we are doing business in India. Now we're going to do business all over the world. It was not visible, right? So making changes where the vision is not so visceral and visible is very challenging, right? This is like, for me, somebody's built a fort, yeah, around a city. All the citizens are inside the fort. There is one soldier on the top of the fort telling the citizens the enemy is coming, but the citizens are all comfortable inside the fort. They don't believe it, right? So how do you make somebody believe what they don't see, right? That's the fundamental challenge, right? How do you bring that vision to life that people can actually feel? There is no one formula for that. It is a whole series of sharing competitors' numbers, talking about the opportunities here, talking about what we can be, right? Painting that future of the company. It's a very long and involved internal sales program. Yeah.
Sir, pulling back a little, uh, could you talk about what went into building the culture and values of the company? And what are the some of the challenges that you were faced with, in retaining these cultures and values as you have expanded internationally? uh, could you also talk about some of the early influences, say from your family? You speak a lot about your grandfather and his influence on your development. So could you talk about the broader culture and values of the company, how they set in, and what it has taken you to protect these cultures and values as you've grown?
So, right from the time my grandfather started his business, there was always a certain sense of equity that he practiced. I mean, it was not written down in paper, but that was the natural, the first-hand behavior. I mean, that's the right-hand behavior for him. And that kind of flowed through my father and uncles and into the respective organization, but it was never documented, right? So we had to, as we were scaling, right, both in terms of number of people as well as geographically, we had to document some of this and convert it into what that behavior, what it means, right? So today our purpose, we call it purpose, right? Our purpose is conscience in action, right? What that means is we have 6 stakeholders: customer, employee, distributor, supplier, investor, and society. These are our 6 stakeholders. These 6 stakeholders at different points in time touch our company, right? And when they touch the company, it is the employees that present that experience, right? So, what conscience in action means is the employee should put themselves in the other side. When you're dealing with a customer, think like a customer, become a customer. When you're dealing with the employee, become an employee, right? So, conscience in action is fundamentally put yourself on the other side and think and be what you would like others to think and do to you, right? So, this is important. And we have 7 values that guide that behavior, right? So, the journey for the company is one declaration of this, talking about these behaviors, celebrating display of these behaviors, and coming down hard on negative behaviors, right? But at the same time, it is also about changing the policies of the company that dictate the employees' engagement with customers. So, for instance, there's a customer, there is a failure. As a service engineer, if the policy says only up to 500 rupees you can do free of cost, the policy prevents that employee to respond quickly to the customer, correct? They have to go to the manager somewhere, up to me, correct? If we can change the policy to enable the service engineer, then you're living your purpose, correct? So it's a long journey. Yeah. So we've come a long way in terms of taking some of the unwritten practices into documentation. And now we've converted some of that into actual practices, but it takes a long time.
So, looking back today, what have been some of the most difficult aspects of building a global industrial company from India?
I think first is you have to believe as an Indian that you can do it, right? We as Indians have a certain inferiority complex. We've got to believe that we can be as good, if not better, than anybody in the world. Now, one is to say it in a bombastic terms as a dialogue in a movie or a political rhetoric. The other is to convert it into disciplined action, right? Both of which is possible, right? So it is all the biggest problem is inside us, right? Our ability to believe in ourselves and then convert that belief into disciplined action. Today, we do have, like I said, an inferiority. And the second is our country is on an instant nirvana path, right? Everything we want quickly, right? Immediately. Instant nirvana cannot build you a global business. Yeah. So it's a long game. Yeah. You have to believe and you have to execute it. So these, I think, are the challenges. Yeah. Nothing outside, all inside. Negative pressure, right? A compressor is positive pressure. It sits in the same spectrum, right? So it's not a diversification at all. It's an adjacency that we get into progressively as we reach a certain maturity in one portfolio, we get into adjacencies, which we will continue to do. Recently, we got into dryers, right? Compressed air dryers, which is again, it may look like diversification. It's not, because it sits next to the compressor, right? And it's part of the global opportunity, right? So we will continue down that path. We will not go away from and go into an unrelated diversification. We will stay within that envelope. Yeah.
Right, sir. Sir, so there's just a question that I missed as part of the earlier discussion on expanding globally. Would it be okay if I
Sure,
ask?
sure.
Yeah. Sir, so how did the company go about building trust and credibility in the international markets. Especially given that compressors are integrated into the manufacturing operations, and largely the industrial infrastructure is built around the compressors, and they are designed into the original project plan. So switching costs are super high, and you had established players in the market while you got in. So how did you go about building trust and credibility in the international markets and in competing against the larger players?
So, like I said, distributors own relationship with customers, right? And we are a distribution-led business. Yeah. So, if I'm a customer, I will rely on a distributor, by and large, to recommend the right compressor for me. So, let me give you a context, right? Typically, a compressor is a very, very small percentage of the overall investment. Point number one, right? So, the amount of time the decision maker spends on choosing a compressor is very low, right? Two, the compressor does not make money for the customer. It costs money, right? In terms of electricity. But if the compressor goes down, there is a huge cost. So low investment, high risk, right? So I rely on a distributor to say, you take ownership, I trust you, give me the right compressor and take care of it to make sure that my plant is always running. If I'm able to convince the distributor that I have a product which will enable you to fulfill your commitment to a customer who trusts you better than another brand can, then I get into the distributor's portfolio, correct? That is critical. Now, how do we do that, right? The way we have done it is, when we entered Europe and America, everyone was giving a 1-year warranty, right? Especially on the air end, right? Critical thing. Ours is either lifetime or 10 years. So what we are saying is, we are so confident about the product that we are giving you this warranty. We will fulfill that warranty. You can take that with high level of confidence to your customer, right? Even after having done that, it is still a slow process, right? We are growing. It means that we are gaining market share, correct? But it's not as fast as we would like to. But we have to keep testing new strategies to get there.
Sir, in the context of the broader values and culture, within LG and what it stands for, something that you've been exceptional about is the way that you've gone about nurturing and treating employees. So this is also reflected, I think, in some of the lowest attrition rates in the industry. So could you talk about how you've gone about recruitment, how you've gone about hiring people, retaining them, taking care of them, which is super critical in this industry?
Yeah. So let me start with the whole principle of equity, which I told you was something that my grandfather brought in, and subsequently it's rooted in. And we said now we are converting that into actual policies, right? So equity for us is very important, right? Now, you can't build excellence in an inequitable institution. You will create mercenaries, right? People come in, join, gets a salary, and they find that their boss is earning 10 times more, or 50 times more, 100 times more, and they don't see themselves moving up, they leave, right? So you can't build it, right? Especially in a country which requires a lot of tenure to build that world class, right? So for us, if you look at the US, the equity, meaning the lowest to highest, on average is a multiple of 365. In India, developing country, it's a multiple of 350, which is quite obscene, right? You can't build excellence with that. So in LG, we have a rule that it will not exceed 32, right? And the reason is, for our company, we need only 6 levels in the organization. So if you double the salary in every level, it comes to 32. right? It's a rough number. It's not scientific, but it's rough. Combine that with the goal that the lowest paid should be as good as any shop floor employee in the world. So today, our shop floor employee gets about 12 lakhs, which is a very good salary for a shop floor employee. But in our factory in Italy, we pay 36 lakhs, 3 times more, right? And the technology goes from our factory here and they're profitable, right? So why is it that we are not able to pay our people 36 lakhs, right? So we have a project which will enable us. It's not about giving away your profit. Yeah, you have to pay 36 and still grow your profit. So we have a program to make that happen. Now, when that happens, the CEO will get about 11 crores, right? 36 into 32, right? Which is not bad, right? So if another CEO wants more, I'll say, fine, raise the bottom. Every time you raise the bottom, you get 32, right? Nothing wrong with that. So you build an organization in a very equitable manner. And I think this is critical in order for us to build a world-class organization. Now, we are starting with shop floor employees. Tomorrow, the entry-level salary for our engineers also will go up, and so on. It is a journey, but we will get there. Yeah.
Sir, as an extension of that, we spoke about building technological capabilities and building engineering capabilities. But I'm very curious as to know what went into skilling the workforce and
Yeah.
what into building what went into the talent development efforts over the years in building this complex technology product.
So on the shop floor employees, we have a vocational training school, right? It's a 3-year training program. We identify youngsters who have done 12th and who have not had the means to study further, who have performed well in 12th, and who are from very challenging economic conditions. We take them in, we pay them a stipend because otherwise there is so much of family pressure to go and earn. Yeah. So to keep the family satisfied, we pay them a monthly stipend for 3 years. And we train them on theory as well as practice. And then they do 3 years and then they go 1 year probation and then they join the workforce. It's guaranteed that you will come into the workforce, right? So with that, we train not just the skills, but the attitude, the mind, as well as the body, right? So there is yoga, there is physical exercise, there's nutrition, all of it is taken care of. And that's what we do, right? It's at the shop floor level. We're trying to now do that for graduate engineer trainees as well as management trainees, right? It's still work in process. We still have a long way to go. Yeah. At the end of the day, we want to be a talent factory. We want to be able to, it's okay if people want to leave us, but we've built that talent that others want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sir, the rise of LG over, say, the last 50-60 years has also correlated, and LG has contributed to it, to the development of Coimbatore as an industrial house. Could you talk about the ecosystem development, sir? So be it suppliers, be it talent, be it engineering talent, or be it technical talent. Could you talk about how the ecosystem has evolved over the last 50-60 years?
So our supplier development programs are very strong, right? Again, it's focused on equity as well as quality, right? We are probably the only company that does aging of supplier payments, right? And we have one person who could lose his job if suppliers are not paid on time, right? No company in the world worries about paying suppliers on time. They rely on suppliers to follow up. Here, there is absolutely no follow-up, right? If follow-up happens, we have failed, right? So it is equity there, and then we build their capability, right? We don't want to jump from one supplier to another supplier to another supplier just for cost and quality. We look at building long-term relationships. Many of our suppliers have grown with us. Some of them have become huge now, maybe as big as LG, right? So we are very happy about that we have played a role in their journey, right? And they've got new customers, yeah. So this is very important. The other thing that is very important is what we do to society, right? We support a school which is called the LG Public School, right? It's a CBSE curriculum program, but it's all about children who are natively brilliant, but from very, very poor families. They don't pay any fees, right? But this is not about just any schooling. The goal is they should get into the best colleges in the country on merit when they finish our school. So we're training our teachers, changing our curriculum, our syllabus, how can we interpret and deliver. There's a whole lot of work that goes on there, right? And we are building a hostel now. Eventually, 100% of the children will be residential, right? So that we are able to give them a lot more than what can be given in a school, right? So this for us is the biggest social contribution. We want to make a difference in the society that we are operating in, right? Through education. Yeah.
Finally, if a young entrepreneur or a business leader in India today wanted to build a globally competitive manufacturing company, what advice would you give them, and what are, say, 3, 4, 5 things that you would set their focus on?
Don't build a competitive advantage that is based on Indians being cheap. Not for any nationalistic reason. Anything that is sold on price has only a fleeting opportunity. Somebody else with a lower cost can then take that business away from you, right? So build a business that is where the competitive value is on technology and internal competence, right? That is very difficult to replicate. Yeah. Don't rely on cheap Indians. If cheap Indians should be just a window of opportunity that you yourself should close rather than somebody else closing it for you. Second is build every business as a global opportunity. Look at the global opportunity. It also builds the quality of your organization to a very high standard when you look at global opportunities. The third is define a purpose for yourself. Let not the business be purely driven by profit. That's not sustainable, right? So I would say these are three foundational, very strong pillars.
Sir, as we wrap up this conversation, one of the striking themes that comes through in the journey of LG Equipments is the quiet, patient craft of building an industrial company over the decades. So from a diversified garage equipment business to a leading global manufacturer of air compressors, the story reflects the power of long-term thinking, of choosing focus, investing in product capability, and competing on the world stage against formidable competitors, Atlas Scopus, that have been building their capability for more than a century. But beyond strategy and markets, what stands out is the philosophy of building an institution, one that is rooted in engineering excellence, a deep respect for customers, and the belief that a company from Coimbatore can compete anywhere in the world and against any of the largest industrial companies in the world. For listeners, your journey and the journey of LG Equipments, it offers a powerful reminder. Great industrial companies are rarely built overnight. They are built patiently through thousands of small decisions, relentless improvement, and a commitment to playing the long game. So, Dr. Varadaraj, thank you for sharing the story and the thinking behind the remarkable journey of LG. It's been a privilege to have you on What Works and Well.
Thank you very much, Prasid. It was great talking to you, right? And good luck with all your future podcasts. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.